next thing that we need to do with monopoly is look at how the curves are set up. Now this is not going to be really different from everything we've already done. It's going to look fairly similar to what we already did with monopolistic competition, with a couple of key differences. For one thing, when we looked at monopolistic and we looked at perfect competition, we had a difference between the firm's curve and the industry's curve in terms of demand. With a monopoly, the firm is the whole deal. So we don't have separate curves for the company versus the industry. It's all one thing. So you got less to worry about. Just to be consistent with the way we've been drawing them, we'll put price cost up here. We'll put quantity down here at the bottom. Quantity meaning output. And again, make sure you do that, just because when we get to Unit 6 with factor markets, you're going to be dealing with a completely different side. It's much easier to just do it the same way all the time. We'll change it when we have to. All right, so this is what we're going to start with. Now, in terms of average total cost and marginal cost, they're going to look pretty much the same way we've been drawing them. Remember, average total cost is going to be kind of bowl shaped. Doesn't have to be that big. And then with marginal cost, it needs to intersect. Okay. Label everything. Now, what we want to focus on with a monopoly is demand and marginal revenue, which are both going to be important. Now, I've gotten some really good questions lately about why demand looks the way it does for a monopoly. Now, depending on the product, it might be more elastic or more inelastic. You're not going to see a perfectly inelastic supply curve, perfectly inelastic demand curve, because for most real-world products, there's still going to be some difference in people's willingness to buy as much. For example, very few things are absolutely necessary to life, and you wouldn't expect to deal with that on the AP exam as an example. So let's go ahead and put in a downward sloping demand curve. And to go with that, we're going to have a downward sloping marginal revenue curve. Why is marginal revenue less than demand? Well, with perfect competition, remember, demand was flat. And we said that marginal revenue and demand were the same thing because that was your price line. Not the same ball game with these imperfectly competitive markets, because your marginal revenue represents your incremental change in your total revenue for additional units that are produced. And because we're moving up the quantity line and lowering the price to sell more units, marginal revenue is going to be lower than the price that you're actually getting for the product. So that's why marginal revenue needs to be below demand. Now, do they have to start at the axis? The answer is probably not. It's not a bad idea to always start them in the same place, however, because what happens is that when you are selling 0 units, pretend those are all coming together. We're doing the big dot again. Jim Bradley's probably having a heart attack somewhere. All right, if you're selling 0 units, you're making $0. So it's not unreasonable to start them at the same place. Now, looking at these lines, we need to be able to pick out what level of production this firm is actually going to produce. And coming back to our nice little rule, it's nice in economics when you have rules instead of friendly suggestions. This is a rule. Remember, and we've talked about this before, you want to produce where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. Remember that. That gives us our quantity. He's happy. There we go. Happy quantity. All right. So looking at this graph, this is our point of intersection. He's nice and blue. We're going to drop straight down to our quantity. Okay, now, in order to determine price, you go straight up to demand. You go straight over this way. Oops. It'd be nice if I'd add the right abbreviation here. Okay, that's our price. Now, how do we figure out where the profit is for this monopolist? What you're going to do, looking at this vertical line again, right here, this one, what you're going to do is look at the distance between the price that's being charged and the average total cost. That gives us our rectangle. That's our profit area right there. So, a couple of things that you're going to need to be able to do for the AP exam are identify on a graph, and you may have to draw this too. It's a possibility for a big question number 1 on the free response section. You need to be able to draw this. You need to be able to identify the level of production, the price that's charged, and draw the profit area. All of that stuff is going to be important. Practice it. Again, it's not that different from what we already did, but you just need to be able to keep this straight. Now, why is there no supply curve? Well, we're treating marginal cost like it's a supply curve, but for the monopolist, because the monopolist is a price maker, they're not really bound by that. So for practical purposes, we're kind of using marginal cost as supply, but it's really not the same thing. Remember, demand slopes down, marginal revenue is below. It doesn't look that different from monopolistic.